Hello, thank you so much for joining us for this great conversation we're going to have around Netflix's new film, Crip Camp. I'm Simon Kilmurray, I'm the Executive Director of International Documentary Association. Before we begin, I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. I'm joining you today from Los Angeles, which is the unceded territory of the Tongva and Chumash peoples, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I also want to thank our media sponsor, IndieWire, for helping us bring this screening series to you, along with support from KCRW, our local public radio station here in Los Angeles, and also thanks to Netflix too. If you want to see more films and Q&As in our fall screening series, please visit documentary.org/screening series. I'm going to let Mara catch up to that. And I also want to thank Mara, who is our ASL interpreter today and has been with us for many of our conversations. These screenings are available for IDA members, so I encourage you to join IDA if you want to see the films in the series, along with all the other work that we do throughout the year, including the IDA Awards, which will be coming up later this year. And as members, you get to vote on the best feature and best short documentary film. So please do join us at ida.org. When Jim Lebrecht first told me about this film a few years ago, I was immediately intrigued and excited about it. And then when I saw what he and Nicole Newnham actually made at Sundance earlier this year at the premiere, I was just blown away. This is a film of immense passion and an immense importance, I think. So I think you will really enjoy both the film and the conversation we're going to have. And without further ado, I'm going to hand over the chair to my friend, our moderator, IndieWire's editor-at-large, Anne Thompson. Anne?
Thanks, Simon. I do enjoy doing these interviews. I always did when they were live at the Landmark, and they're strange in this Zoom context, but it's still an engaging and exciting conversation. And I wish all of you could be here to ask questions, but we'll just muddle on as best we can. I want to introduce Nicole Newnham and Jim Lebrecht, the co-directors of Crip Camp. There they are. Hi, guys. Welcome. So what I want to ask you about, first of all, is how the two of you got to know each other. I understand, Jim, you were working in sound design with Nicole. How long did you work together over your careers?
Well, Nicole and I started working on Crip Camp maybe close to 6 years now, but 15 years previous to that, I had been her sound mixer and sound designer on one of, I guess that was your first feature-length documentary, Sentenced Home. And anyway, Nicole and I've had the pleasure of working with her on 3 of her previous feature-length documentaries, Sentenced Home, Repu Europe, and the Revolutionary Optimist. It's been, I have some really wonderful collaborations just as a sound mixer, but ours was always really kind of like one of the top for me.
How did you two start to talk together about Crip Camp and working together and how you would work together?
Well, I had become very interested in Jim's I would say sort of like increasing engagement in advocacy around media representation of people with disabilities and also access for filmmakers with disabilities within our own documentary world. And it wasn't uncommon for me to come in to mix a film and have Jim, engaging me in like a spirited conversation about why aren't film festivals more accessible, for instance, things like that. And so we started talking about disability, and he quite honestly started introducing me to the idea of disability culture and disability community. And eventually he said, I'm interested in trying to co-produce or help get films off the ground that could be the sorts of films I'd like to see in disability that, that you weren't seeing. And Jim was seeing like almost every documentary that was ever made was coming across his desk as a sound mixer and sound designer. so we had a lunch, and he had some really interesting kind of issue-oriented ideas around documentaries, but it was this sort of offhanded remark he made, at the end of that lunch. What I really have always wanted to see is a film about my summer camp. And I confess that when he said that, I had probably a fairly stereotypical idea in my mind of kind of like, a summer camp for kids with disabilities. And I thought I knew what was going to come when I said, tell me about your summer camp. And I was totally unprepared for what he was going to say, Oh yeah, it's down the road from Woodstock, and it was this wild hippie thing. And I went there because I could smoke dope with the counselors, and, the counselors and the campers, we were all equal, and we all had, affairs and whatnot. It was just really engaging, exciting, and new to me. And he sent me some photographs that just completely blew my mind. And then he offered up a very, very intriguing theory, which was, I think there's something about this sort of profound liberatory experience of this camp that is connected to the people who made an exodus out to Berkeley and became involved in the disability civil rights movement. And the combination of those two things seemed like it could be a really, really intriguing documentary. But the more I thought about it, I thought what was really exciting was that Jim lived this, it's his life story. And so I felt I shouldn't be directing it on him producing it with me. I felt we should co-direct it. And I proposed that to him. And luckily he said yes, and we were off and running.
Jim, when you were first talking about this, what did you think your role would be? And were you surprised when Nicole suggested that you be a director as well?
Well, as Nicole said, I mean, to be honest with you, Nicole, actually, I've never told you this. I didn't even think you'd want me as a producer. I literally was just like, there's this great story here. You're a great filmmaker. Take it away. I mean, certainly we would be involved in it. But and when Nicole asked me to direct, it was, it didn't take me very long to say yes, but I didn't just do it blithely. It was kind of like, makes a lot of sense, and that's really a wonderful offer. And because this is the first time I've ever been I've been in many seats in my life, but I've never been in the director's seat before, nor as really a producer. So I knew that I was going to have to learn a lot about really, just the kind of how the sausage is made.
One of the things that I wondered about is that you were an advocate, you were an activist, and you knew a lot about the history of disability and advocacy in America. But did you find yourself revisiting that history, and in the course of finding the archives, how much did you know existed, and how much, and this is the archive question is for both of you, but I'm curious about Jim learning things he didn't know in the course of that.
It's been my little secret that I think I didn't know nearly as much as I thought I should have. I mean, I knew Judy Heumann, and I was friends with her, and I knew about the 504 sit-in in San Francisco, but I didn't really know kind of the deeper story, and how the nationwide demonstration that happened in April of '77 started, and so I was kind of on this journey, with Nicole to really know the story really well.
And I'm curious about all the archive material that you found. And did you know that camp, all of those camp videos existed? And some of them were yours, or were they not yours, Jim?
Oh, well, no, none of that was mine. I mean, the black and white footage was done by this group called the People's Video Theater, who had showed up at Camp Jened, and the 8mm from camp was shot by people who were hoping to make a fundraising film about Camp Jened.
I don't know. I'm a boomer myself. I'm actually familiar with I'm a deadhead. Okay, I actually
Well, all right.
Related very strongly. Richie Havens was my first album that I ever bought.
Oh, that's great.
A mixed bag.
Okay, I want you just to see this. This is the Dude Abides mask I'm wearing. So it's the Lebowski and Deadhead mashup.
There you go. So
like
you
the
can
last
see
thing
that
I
I was in from, the first moments of the movie. But Nicole, talk about the archives and that whole search and what you found.
Well, initially, so we had these incredible photographs that Counselor had taken, hundreds of black and white photographs that were astonishing. And people had been compiling their personal photographs of the camp on Facebook for years. And so that was my first deep dive into kind of the visual world of the camp. And then we're like, well, how are we going to recreate what it really felt like to be there? What did it feel like to go have a makeout session behind the bunk and things like that? Because our concept from the beginning was, let's make this sort of a mashup of something like, The Breakfast Club or Wet Hot American Summer, and like The Times of Harvey Milk, a community told story of a civil rights history. And but immersion in the camp experience was clear. It was clear that that was going to be really important. So we thought, well, maybe we'll hire young actors with disabilities and we'll recreate these scenes. And our first, fundraising pitches and whatnot for the project were based on that theory, which we were actually really excited about. And we had all kinds of wonderful plans for. But then in the meantime, Jim said, I think you should see if you could find this something called the People's something, I can't quite remember,
There it is.
like video group that, stumbled upon the camp. And I think they gave me a camera, and I think I filmed a tour of the camp. And then I'm like, oh God, that would be the holy grail if we could find that. And I just looked and looked and looked, and I finally found this little ad in the back of a digitized video maker magazine from the early 70s that said, crabs outbreak at Camp Jened for the handicapped by the People's Video Theater, $6.95. And I was like, hallelujah. So then I found out who was in the People's Video Theater and tracked down eventually Howard Gutstadt, who was on the board of an anarchist bookstore in San Francisco.
Of course.
And they left him a note on our behalf. And Jim and I are sitting there planning our, film shoots with actors. And we get this email, yes, we have 5.5 hours of footage. We're midway through transferring it. It was all shot early, Portapak video, black and white video. And we'd love to collaborate with you. And we went and met Howard in San Francisco. And when Jim rolled into the cafe, Howard burst into tears. Because the beautiful thing is that it wasn't just footage that was shot. It was footage that was shot from the same kind of revolutionary, world-changing, heart and mind opening point of view and kind of community empowerment point of view that we had. And so there was, I think, for them to have, given these young people a platform and a voice 50 years ago, and then to see one of those young people taking that footage and carrying the story forward was really emotional and powerful. And we were so lucky to find it.
Jim, what was it like for you looking at the footage?
Oh, it was like, it was like looking.
You were really, you're a handsome man, but you were cute.
Yeah, well, time does have ravages on all of us, but except Nicole. Well, yeah, first off, if I only knew that I was kind of that cute of a guy, but although I think that the film shows that I had a fairly healthy ego nonetheless, it was really like looking down like into this like incredible like telescope or microscope back in time. And I'm sitting in the room where Nicole and I started looking at this hard drive that we received. And there were 11 videos. And it was every video was just, like this Christmas present that we were opening up. And I was seeing people that I hadn't, and things I hadn't seen, in 45 some odd years. And there are people there that I was close with who are no longer with us. And actually, kind of part of it that was very bittersweet was, will I see more of my friend Jack Eckelman? Because Jack was somebody, beyond being just an incredible counselor, really kind of the heart and soul of that place. When I was a adolescent, going through some very hard times in just north of New York City, he'd have me down to his apartment in Brooklyn for the weekends, and I could call him when I was, crying my eyes out. So indeed, very, very bittersweet. But I'll also say that for, our experience was there were certain things that we saw that, we literally just kind of, you just have to, your jaw goes right down to here. And one of those was this scene where we're all gathered around a table outside and having this video, which is making a video about our message to our parents. And there's Nancy Rosenblum, who has the microphone, who has disability affected speech, and it's very difficult to quite make out what she's saying. And in this really incredible pivotal moment, across the table from her, Steve Hoffman interprets what she said. He understood her.
Yeah.
And I have to say one thing about the People's Video Theater. They didn't come in there like going, hey, camp director, tell us how you're taking care of all these wonderful handicapped people and how good you are. And, how do you give out the medicine or whatever, They were very much about taking this new technology and really bringing it to marginalized communities. But they treated us as equals, not as less than. And as you see in the film, they said, hey, we're here. This is who we are. Let's do something together. And so we grasped that moment to have that moment where we had that roundtable discussion about our message to parents.
So the one thing that must have emerged from the video too was recognizing that Judy Heumann could be your message bearer through the sort of through line, along with Jim through the narrative, right?
Yeah, I think it was a difficult balance to find. I think a lot of the kind of shaping of the story involved kind of how do we strike this balance between having Judy, who's like a massive major historical figure, and Jim, who's the kind of personal entryway into the story, but still have it be a community told story and have it be a movement story and not have it be, a Judy Heumann biopic or a Jim Lebrecht personal film, and kind of fusing all of those things together so that they felt right was really like this kind of constant, just sort of, we're constantly massaging it, working it, screening it for people, adjusting it until we got that balance right. And also until we kind of figured out how to position Jim and Judy. I think for the first 15 minutes of the film, you're kind of meeting people in this equitable fashion, along with in the People's Video Theater footage, you're meeting other campers and everything. And then sort of Judy, I think one of the things that we finally did that really made it work was seeing Judy kind of emerge from that scene where she's planning the lasagna, so she's right in the middle of everything. She's just a part of the camp, but the viewer themselves is like, oh, there's something going on there with that person, because even, and then it wasn't until much, much later and after lots of struggle to try to find all the scraps of footage and piece them together of the 504 sit-in and the events that came later, that we saw actually, in several of the archival moments, you can see Judy and she's just behaving in exactly the same way as the camp. And so our hope was that when people saw her, at the first night of the sit-in saying like, who here wants to sleep on the floor, that everybody would be thinking like, oh my God, that's just like when she was, figuring out what the campers should be eating for dinner. And so that she feels like a person of the movement, and part and parcel of it. And I think for us, one of the most satisfying moments in this whole journey with the film was the opening night at Sundance, when there was a standing ovation just for Judy, when Judy was handed the microphone to speak, and everyone applauded for her for like 10 minutes, because I think it's clear, it was clear to us then, like, that the film was going to play a role in elevating Judy to the status that she deserved, but from within this story of Judy and her friends. And you know, she's got a book out now called Being Human, which is really wonderful. And the whole forward to it is about like how she's uncomfortable telling a story about just her, because she always thinks of it as, you know, us. So
I think one of the things that really hits hard about the movie, and for me, I'm sure I'm not alone. I didn't realize how much protests, like the one on the White House steps, played a part in this, and it really moved me deeply that it actually worked, and the Disability Act actually went forward. It was extraordinary for me to see all of that. I didn't know it all at all, and you must have been getting a lot of reaction like that from people, because you were making a story that was going to reach out to more than the insider community. It was supposed to reach a wide group. You intended that, right?
Yeah, I mean, our hope was that the structure of the film, you know, was not going to be a 3-act structure focused on one character, but would really be like, okay, Jeanette is a stone thrown in the water, and then we're seeing through all of this, you know, increasing protest and the community increasingly gathering and this larger movement being built that kind of ripples outward from that, you know, and so we thought it was very important to not clue people into where it was going, you know, so that you have that kind of feeling of like, is this whole film going to be at the summer camp? And then no, oh my God, they're doing that and they're doing that and they're doing that, and you're just seeing things grow. And it does seem like that's been a powerful way to introduce people to a history that's been really unfairly forgotten and neglected, you know, throughout history. And the effort that we had to make to kind of, you know, pull together the archival was just sort of a symptom of that, you know, that this hasn't been something that people have paid attention to. So yeah, indeed, when the film came out, we got just these waves of people saying like, why didn't I know this story? Why didn't I know this happened? And Judy said, well, if you like a sort of well-educated progressive Sundance audience didn't know this happened, which I think she was actually personally a little shocked that people like that so many people didn't know it. She said, you know, maybe you should ask yourselves why you weren't listening. Or
Yeah,
so
absolutely. Fair enough. So Jim, you were part of making this work. You had access to people who trusted you, who shared their lives with you. How did it feel to get out there and report this story the way that you did?
I felt a huge sense of responsibility to really do it right, do it thoroughly, to be very inclusive. And this is something that Nicole and I both share very deeply. And I will say that, you know, when we were interviewing Corbett O'Toole, we would set it up. Nicole and I would both ask questions, but we would kind of set up the interviews where Nicole and I come up with a list of questions, and I would start asking them at first, and people would be talking to me just off camera. And Corbett said to me, you know, Jim, I wouldn't be talking like this to anybody else, anybody from outside the community. But that because I have this lived experience, and she knew who I was, that she had faith that whatever she said or would be used, you know, the right way. It's so easy to take a story like this and turn it into, you know, this inspirational story. Well, it is inspirational for what people did, but you can screw it up by, you know, kind of making, wow, they can't walk. And boy, they got out of their houses. Whoop-de-doo, you know? And so for, you know, and in fact, so at one point in the production, we decided that I would be also an interview also. Originally, I wasn't really going to be an interview. And Nicole says, we have to have Denise Shara Jacobson being there so that I could talk to her to keep, you know, to keep me true and to keep me centered on this is my, you know, I wasn't going to BS anybody.
And to have that feeling of intimacy, you know, like that this is a community telling its story to each other and sort of celebrating their memories and their experiences and enjoying them, you know, with each other. For me, like the texture of the film that has like Jim cracking up when, you know, Neil and Denise are telling their story of how they met and telling jokes, you know, it's I don't know that people know it's Jim laughing in the background, but there's that sense of kind of like warmth and shared experience, and you feel really privileged, I think, to be hearing the story told in that way, and it keeps you from feeling like the disability community is an othered community that you're gazing at. You know, it really feels like you're hearing the story from the inside out.
So when did you get involved with Netflix, and when did you get involved with the Obamas?
Well, it was kind of simultaneous, actually. We were at the Sundance Documentary Edit Lab, workshopping the film and working on it. And we had a fundraising trailer and some sort of scenes cut together. And we had started a conversation with Netflix. And simultaneous to that, we were able to get the fundraising trailer to Priya Swaminathan, who had just been hired to run Higher Ground. And when we got home from the lab, she called us up and said, you know, I'm not quite sure what you're doing, but there's something really interesting here. I keep watching this thing. And then, you know, I watch it again and again, and I send it to my bosses and they feel similarly.
Bosses.
We were really overwhelmed, you know, but our brilliant executive producer, Howard Gertler, had the idea that the Obamas would be interested because Judy had worked in the Obama State Department.
Right. She was the advisor for disabilities, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then also, you know, there's the themes that are so resonant with the Obama's values of, you know, grassroots organizing and the ability of young people to make change and the importance of people telling their story. So anyway, Priya came up and watched a bunch of footage, and she said this thing to us that really resonated and made us feel like they were the right partner for us, which was, I think you have a culture changing project. And that was our really closely held dream, you know, was that the film could play a role in shifting perception of people with disabilities and really shift culture, as well as educate people about this story. So yeah, they came on board. They were active executive producers. They watched 3 different cuts of the film and gave feedback. And it was, you know, a completely incredible partnership.
And you got to meet them.
We didn't.
Ever?
No.
Not yet.
Damn.
Not yet.
Pandemic sort of, you know.
That's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem. All right. So so the other question I had was Nicole, were you, as you were going through this and learning about it yourself, did you sort of see yourself as a standing in for the viewer in a way, in terms of recognizing what we don't know and what we needed to learn?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was really creatively exciting and rewarding to make the film with Jim and to have our 2 perspectives, a disabled and a non-disabled perspective, and to be making the film in this unique way where we definitely wanted a broad audience and we wanted non-disabled people to be brought along, but we wanted people from the disability community to be recognizing an authentic lived experience and authentic portrayal of issues that were important to the community. And so a lot of it was kind of, you know, us figuring out like how do we do both things, and one of the things that we figured out how to do was sort of have moments where the non-disabled viewer was becoming, and to some extent, you know, people with disabilities too, because you know, there's definitely like issues of bias and misperception within the disability community around disabilities that are different than your own, you know. So the campers, for instance, like Jim, had to become comfortable with other campers that had disability affected speech or different disabilities, and the viewer had to do that too. The viewer had to kind of come into the camp, be confronted with their own bias and their own discomfort, and then form bonds and make friends, and by the end of the summer realize they were a changed person, and then go on this sort of historical journey. And I don't know that we could have effectively navigated that such that it really resonates as as this authentic representation of disability, but that the non-disabled viewer is held and challenged, in the way that they are, without the sort of kind of just creative kind of pushing on each other that Jim and I did throughout the process.
So Jim, did you feel sort of liberated in a way in terms of just having a wider range of opportunity to express yourself in this situation? You're a filmmaker. You're able to be the director of something instead of helping serve other people's visions.
Well, it's really kind of remarkable going to Sundance as a director and producer versus a sound mixer or sound supervisor. You get it anyway. So that was a little bit of an eye opener. Yeah, I mean, I found myself now in rooms that I've never been in before, and in discussions that I've never been in before because of our film. There's people are inviting me to join them, and I certainly, especially in the last couple of years, try to find myself, if I'm at a conference or something, I want to go to the inclusion and diversity workshop, and I want to sit there and see if they discuss disability. And certainly it's better than it was a couple of years ago, but I often would find myself needing to advocate if people were kind of talking about very, very important communities, very marginalized communities, but having left people with disabilities out. And just to say, you can't ignore us. We're already marginalized. We're already invisible. And we need to be part of this discussion. So, as somebody who's been kind of an activist for most of my life, this has been, that part of all of this has been so incredible for me, to be able to use what I know to try to advocate for my community.
But as a filmmaker, when there aren't that many other filmmakers like you in the world, do you feel like you have a burden in terms of representing your community?
I felt that for my whole career.
Mm.
I really have. I just didn't want to be the guy in the wheelchair that screwed it up. And so I fortunately found, a home at the Salt Sands Film Center back in the very late 80s. And I was the only person that I knew with a disability around there. And, so I think that it made me much better at what I do, because I felt like, I don't want people to decide that people with disabilities are incompetent if I fail.
There was a beautiful scene that we cut out of Crip Camp, which I miss, which was of Jim and Judy. They went to the Berkeley Rep, and Jim was showing Judy like the new accessible Berkeley Repertory Theater, which he had worked in. And he was just started chatting with Judy in this interview, and brought up the fact that he felt a little guilty that he hadn't been as much of an active part in the 504 sit-in and the move. Well, you were in college then, but like in some of the meetings and actions and protests that had taken place. And Judy said, Jimmy, we had our eyes on you the whole time. She said, we used to go to a Chinese restaurant across the street from the old Berkeley Rep and look at the stairs that you had to climb up to get into the sound booth and say, he's so strong. How does he do that? And she said, you were basically living what we were fighting for. And the point she was making is that there are different ways of changing the world, and that was Jim's contribution. Has been his career. So it was lovely.
So what kind of opportunities are opening up, do you think, for other filmmakers with disability? And have you seen any changes, any positive moves in that direction?
Well, just recently, the Motion Picture Academy has been really kind of focusing on disability. I was fortunate to be part of a video with folks like Lisa Cordes and Dawn Porter on talking about documentaries through through our own lens. And so to be included in that discussion was very meaningful. And just yesterday, there's a group of, there was a, excuse me, the Academy launched a video where they had interviewed a bunch of different people with disabilities, kind of talking about representation and behind the camera and such. So I'm really kind of seeing the Academy really stepping up and really kind of promoting the fact that, we are missing from filmmaking. And there's so much harm when not only are you underrepresented, but you're misrepresented. And those things don't change unless we are like in the writers' rooms or we are directors or producers. And issues like authentic casting are a huge problem. I don't want to see one more actor who's non-disabled playing a quadriplegic. But we're not going to get the box office draw until the industry opens up opportunities for us to learn our craft and to rise within the ranks. And people aren't going to do that unless they are educated the fact that just because you haven't seen us there doesn't mean we don't exist. It doesn't mean that we're incompetent or incapable. Au contraire, if I've gotten to your door, I've done something fairly extraordinary just to be able to get my face in front of yours. So I am seeing things change. And I want to say one thing about the IDA, that a couple of years ago, a group of us had a panel called The Ramp Less Traveled. And it was about documentary filmmakers with disabilities. And right after that, we had a convening. And there were about 70 people in a room. And they were filmmakers with disabilities and our allies. And it was the first time a number of us had ever met each other. And looking at other organizations like ADOC and Brown Girls Doc Mafia, a few of us got together and started a group called Forward Doc, Filmmakers with Disabilities Doc. And we have about 150 members now.
That's
so our
great.
community is coming together and we're helping each other and we're promoting each other. I'm really, that makes me extremely happy.
Is there a new Ford and Mellon thing going on?
Yeah, there's so Ford, the Ford Foundation and the Andrew Mellon Foundation funded a $1 million initiative through United States Artists called the Disabilities Futures Fellowship. And that fellowship is made up of 20 different artists, visual artists, dancers, writers and such within the disabled community. And I'm fortunate to be one of those, a member of that cohort. And it was really saying that, look, our community has a great deal to contribute to society through the arts. And it wasn't just like helping us. It was like our voices need to be seen. We are part of society that you're missing. And that, we don't look upon our disabilities as a disadvantage. We look upon our disabilities as a unique vantage point for which we can all learn from.
One of the things that has broken in the past couple of days, unfortunately, is the ascension of Amy Coney Barrett to the Supreme Court. Are you all worried about what that could mean in all sorts of ways, but in the disability community?
I can't tell you what it felt like when the Affordable Care Act passed. Because for the first time, I knew that I could get health insurance, or I could get affordable health insurance, and that has always been a fear of mine. And now, with the Supreme Court going more to the right, and cases coming up that could eliminate the Affordable Care Act with nothing to replace it. This is the only thing that is forcing insurance companies to insure somebody like me. I mean, and I just, yeah, I mean, I'm obsessively looking at polls and everything, because I feel like my life and other people's lives aren't just affected, we're in danger.
I think, you know, one of the things that this experience and working on this film and being connected to the movement has really taught me is that disability is just, it's a part of the diversity and spectrum of human experience, and it touches all of our lives, you know? And that's why I really recommend for people who are upset about what's going on and who are as concerned about healthcare and the future of healthcare in particular. I think that disability activists and disability justice activists in particular have so much to offer, you know, because I mean, disability activists have been on the forefront, for instance, in looking at the impact of institutionalization on people and the rights of people who are institutionalized. And that might seem like something that isn't going to affect your life until, you know, it does. And, you know, your parents are in an institution and there's a pandemic and an outbreak, you know, which we're seeing increasingly. These kinds of things are really impacting all of us. So to the extent that the climate and what's going on right now is kind of teaching all of us how interconnected we are, and the importance of equity, I feel like, you know, disability activists and disability thinkers are people who have been on the forefront of these fights and have a lot of answers about, you know, mutual aid networks, ways that we can fight, infrastructure, you know, kind of for fighting these battles. So I hope that that as we fight back, that we're listening to and elevating the voices of people with disabilities in that discussion.
Well, I think this is a good place to end our conversation. Actually, we could go on, but this has been really great. I really enjoyed this. And thank you for making this movie, which, by the way, is as much fun as it is enlightening. And that's an important thing in these times. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.
Thank you.